Alright, what's up everyone, I'm Loki, and today we're going to be taking a look at the very unfortunate situation that the Seattle Seahawks are in right now going into the 2021 offseason. Going into the offseason for 2021, every single team is going to be negatively affected by what happened with the coronavirus in the NFL, not being able to sell tickets to fans, not being able to fill up stadiums, not being able to make money from that is definitely going to impact the salary cap in a very negative way, and that's something that every team's going to have to overcome. But with the Seahawks having such a clear issue at offensive line and offensive line getting more and more expensive by the year, this is a big problem for the Seahawks right now. Going into this 2021 offseason, Over the Cap has projected the Seattle Seahawks to have around $4 million. The problem with this though is the fact that Over the Cap only shows 47 rostered players for the Seahawks being estimated to have $4 million. So of course, the Seahawks will have to bring in more people, which means even less cap. So definitely going into this offseason, it seems like the Seahawks are going to have to make some crazy moves, or at least some pretty big moves to actually get some cap free so that they can spend it on things that they need. And that brings me into the first point of this video, clearing up cap space. Seahawks have some pretty notable free agents going into this offseason that they would most likely like to have back. Wright, Shaquille Griffin, and Carson are the top three of those. There are definitely some other guys, but right now it doesn't even seem like the Seahawks will be able to get those three. So the Seahawks are going to have to clear up some room. And I think there are three relatively realistic options that the Seahawks might actually end up doing. And the names surrounding those are Dunlap, Jarran Reed, and Russell Wilson. The first one that I'm going to be talking about is going to be Russell Wilson because I think it's the easiest to explain, probably the quickest to get by. And the idea here is that Russell Wilson would take kind of a discount because the Seahawks obviously need money if they're going to want to try to protect him with an offensive line. And the thing is, I don't think that's going to happen. Russell Wilson has already been playing on a technical discount, you could say, because he's getting paid so much less than what the top quarterback is earning. And Russell Wilson being one of those top quarterbacks, him being paid $9 million less than the top quarterback money right now going into 2021 is definitely a discount that he's already on. I don't think he's going to be taking more of a pay cut, nor should he really have to, because he has been playing for less than what the top quarterbacks are getting paid right now. So I don't think that's going to happen. And honestly, maybe there is a chance that he will do it because he'll kind of invest in himself. If he, takes a loss in money this year and he ends up doing a lot better because he's more well protected, and that leads to him being, better protected, longer career, make more money in the long run, maybe he'll do it. I just don't think it's a very realistic option. People have said that that might be one of the few ways that the Seahawks can bring in money, but it just doesn't seem like that's going to be a real option for the Seahawks. I don't think Russell Wilson's taking a pay cut. Now, the second player that I think might be in some trouble is Dunlap, and it's very unfortunate because we brought in Dunlap. We didn't really trade too much for him, but we brought him in, and he was definitely a huge playmaker for us. He made a huge difference in our defense and our pass rush, and it was great to have him. But he has a $14 million cap hit, and $14 million can go a long way if you're the Seahawks trying to build a good offensive line for Russell Wilson, or trying to keep Wright, Shaquille Griffin, or something like that. There's definitely a lot of things you can do with $14 million, and Dunlap right now, kind of getting old, getting paid a lot of money. There's definitely a chance that he might be a cap casualty this offseason. Although the Seahawks invested in a trade to get him, and it definitely paid off, he was a huge factor in why our defense was so good in the second half of the season. It just seems like for $14 million, there's going to have to be something figured out with that contract. Maybe they extend him a year or two and make him take a lot less money. Maybe they just cut him outright. Really, there's a lot of things that could happen. If he does end up getting cut, I think Alton Robinson has a very promising future. He looked really good last year in the limited snaps that he got. LJ Collier was looking all right. Darrell Taylor should be healthy going into next season, so maybe he can be a big impact off the edge for us. But Dunlap right now, that $14 million cap hit is a huge cap hit for the Seahawks to take for someone that's that old. And I think that realistically, he might be off the team come this offseason because the Seahawks are going to need that money. And now the third relatively realistic thing that the Seahawks might end up doing is trading Jarran Reed. Now, Jarran Reed is definitely a great player. He got an extension from the Seahawks not too long ago, and he's definitely a good player, but there have been some questions being posed if he's actually worth the money, because it seems like when he doesn't have good rushers around him, he's just pretty average. But when he has good rushers, he's a great player. So he's really dependent on having great players around him. And that's what makes people question if he's worth the $9 million cap hit that the Seahawks will be taking with him being on roster. So trading him, maybe getting a couple picks back, and being able to use some draft capital and draft some players that will be cheaper and get some money back to be able to spend in free agency, that might be a possibility. Trading Jarran Reed for maybe a second round pick, if you can even get that, maybe a third and a fourth, something like that. Don't know what his value would be on the market, but the cap hit of $9 million that would be freed up if Jarran Reed ended up getting traded, plus probably getting some draft capital to be able to draft younger, more cheap guys to be playing for the Seahawks. I think that could be a possible option for the Seahawks to do. I definitely think that the most realistic option out of these three is going to be something happening with Carlos Dunlap. Unfortunately enough, he was a huge player for us, but it definitely seems like that $14 million cap hit is going to have to get negated somehow. Now that we've talked about some of the possible options for the Seahawks to clear up some cap space and make some money available for free agency, what would the Seahawks actually be spending that on? Now, me personally, I believe there are 5 main things that the Seahawks would be focusing on, 3 players and 2 positions of need. Obviously, you have KJ Wright, Shaquille Griffin, Chris Carson. You also have some of the guys that are also going into free agency that are a little bit lesser names. And then you have 2 positions of need. I believe corner, you want to just have the best corners you can possibly have. And then a huge focus of the Seahawks going into this offseason, I can only assume, is going to be offensive line. Now, first to start out with KJ Wright. KJ Wright is someone who has played very well over the past few years. He had an amazing year last year. He really showed himself to be a top linebacker, even if he is getting a bit old. And he has stated that he's not going to be giving the Seattle Seahawks any discounts for him coming back. He wants to get paid, he wants a multi-year deal, and it makes a lot of sense. Linebacker is a very rough position to play. Normally you don't have those long careers, so he wants to get his money before he ends up finishing his career out, which makes a lot of sense. I respect it. Will the Seahawks give him the money? It's questionable. It depends on how much money he wants. Since he's not going to be giving the Seahawks a discount, he wants a multi-year deal. For someone who is getting older and is kind of in the back half of his career, it doesn't really make too much sense, in my opinion, to give him a long multi-year deal. Maybe if we can get him to a 2-year deal that's, pretty expensive, that would be a good idea in my opinion, but it's questionable if the Seahawks will even have the money that KJ Wright's going to be asking for, because you really can't be paying Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright top linebacker money if you want to be able to build around in other places. And the Seahawks are already really struggling on cap space, so KJ Wright, although I would love to have him back, it's kind of questionable if he will actually be back, since he wants the money that he deserves for having such great seasons recently, and I understand him wanting that money, and it would be disappointing to see him go. And the second player that the Seahawks are definitely going to be trying to get back is Shaquille Griffin. Shaquille Griffin is definitely a great corner. He's a young corner, probably one of the best corners the Seahawks have had recently since the Legion of Boom kind of split up. DJ Reed has been looking amazing. I definitely think there's some more room to grow for getting a very solid, kind of core of cornerbacks. But right now, I think Shaquille Griffin definitely proved that he can be a great corner, and he still has room to grow. So I think signing him back would definitely be a very good idea. Spot Track has him estimated as an $11 million a year average for his market value. So will the Seahawks be able to make the money to actually, be able to pay him? It's going to be interesting to see what they'll do. I definitely think this is the guy that the Seahawks are going to be focusing on. KJ Wright, getting a bit up there in age. Chris Carson, he's been dealing with a lot of injuries throughout his career, but Shaquille Griffin has been a solid guy throughout his time in Seattle, and I think they're going to want to bring him back. And now that brings me to number 3, Chris Carson. This is a very interesting one. I think every single Seahawks fan loves Chris Carson. They see glimpses of Marshawn Lynch. He's a power runner that can also be elusive at times. He's made some great plays, he's made some bad plays, but he's definitely a very, very solid running back nonetheless. He's dealt with injuries and it's been very unfortunate, but he is up for contract and he's looking to make some money. Reports that I've seen have said that Chris Carson is looking to make $8 million or more going into this offseason, and that's a lot of money to pay a guy who has been dealing with a lot of injuries, and you don't even know if he's going to be on the field the entire year. Do you really want to put your money into that guy, give him that big running back contract to, maybe have him for 8 games a season, or maybe you have him for 12 games a season, but he misses the last 4, and then going into the playoffs he's injured? It's very questionable dealing with someone with injuries like Chris Carson's had. I'm a huge fan of Chris Carson. I think a lot of Seahawks fans are huge fans of Chris Carson, but with that much money and the injury history that he's had, it's definitely questionable. Some amazing running backs have looked completely average after getting their big payday, and honestly, it's really unfortunate for running backs in the NFL, but it just does seem like it doesn't make a lot of sense for teams to put big money into the running back position when you can basically draft someone out of college every 4 years and they'll be good enough to be your running back. If you have someone insanely special like Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, someone like that, you want to lock them down, but for someone like Chris Carson, who's been very, very solid, but not like a superstar, it's tough to kind of give him the money. I mean, I would like to see him back. Hopefully he'll take a little bit less since he's been injured so much throughout his career, but if he's looking to get $8-10 million, I just think that's a bit much. And Rashad Penny, he's shown that he can be good, and Chuba Hubbard is someone that I've seen in college. I really don't pay attention to college much, but Chuba Hubbard is a name that I've been seeing. I might be saying it wrong, but that might be a guy that we could draft in the 4th round or something like that. I've seen some mock drafts, a lot of mock drafts having him being picked up, and he might be a pretty interesting guy to come in and kind of take that Chris Carson spot over. For those three guys going into free agency this offseason, I think Shaquille Griffin is going to be brought back one way or another. KJ Wright and Chris Carson are questionable. I'd like to have them both back, but really the Seahawks do not have a lot of cap space. It'll be really tough for them to be bringing them back and being able to fill out positions of need that they have. There are obviously some other guys like David Moore, who I believe is up for contract. I think there's some other guys. I think Quentin Dunbar's out of contract. He might be able to take a smaller contract to kind of come back and prove himself. And I mean, there's a lot of guys that are leaving the team right now that the Seahawks would like to bring back, but those are the three main guys, KJ Wright, Chris Carson, Shaquille Griffin, that I think are going to be the main priorities of the Seahawks going into this offseason. And now, finally, I want to talk about two key positions that I think the Seahawks are going to need to focus on going into this offseason. And that's going to be corner, because we have definitely shown that our corners can be great, but we have shown that sometimes our third, fourth, maybe even second corner have some really bad games. You need some guys that can fill in. You really want to be solid all around at corner. You don't want to have a good number one, a good number two, and then have a big drop off. I think the Seahawks should invest a little bit more in getting a corner 3, corner 4, and then of course the huge focus that the Seahawks must have is offensive line. And I think that's going to be expensive, because if the Seahawks want to appease Russell Wilson and make him want to stay, because they have shown that they will put the time and the money and the effort into getting an offensive line, they're going to have to go big. I think they're going to have to spend well over $10 million on that offensive line. Maybe get one solid guy for $8 to $10 million, or maybe get, two pretty good guys for $6 million each. Something like that. The Seahawks are going to have to put money if they want to appease Russell Wilson and show that they are going to put the effort in to get some linemen. I definitely plan on making a video of offensive linemen that the Seahawks might be able to pick up, because there are definitely some interesting options. There's definitely much more information that I want to put into a video like this, where I've already talked about a bunch of different other things, but offensive line is going to be a huge one. There's a lot of money that can potentially be spent on the offensive line, and I think the only way Russell Wilson could restructure his contract to give the Seahawks more cap room to spend is going to be if they are going to spend it on offensive line. So I think offensive line is going to be a huge focus, right behind Shaquille Griffin and probably KJ Wright. So, I mean, going into this offseason, it's very unfortunate for the Seahawks that they're dealing with such bad cap issues, especially in a year where the cap is just going to be completely messed up because of everything that's been happening in the NFL, in the world. So it's definitely unfortunate for the Seahawks going into this offseason. I think there are some big moves that are going to have to be made. Some unfortunate ones, like maybe cutting Carlos Dunlap or trading Jarran Reed. And maybe there will be some great moves, like the Seahawks get a very good offensive lineman. They go and invest in the offensive line and really just protect Russell Wilson for the first time in his career. That'd be amazing to see. But, I mean, really, you have no idea what's going to happen until it happens. We'll just have to see what happens going into this free agency period for the Seattle Seahawks. Still, nobody knows what the cap is going to be for the NFL because it hasn't been set in stone yet. There are estimates of like 183 million, 184 million, but it could definitely go down to the 170s. So we'll see what happens going into this free agency. It's going to be very interesting what the Seahawks do, what the cap ends up being. But, like I said, you won't know until you know. But with that, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you think the Seahawks could potentially do to free up some money this offseason, what you think they should spend money on this offseason, and out of Shaquille Griffin, KJ Wright, and Chris Carson, who should they bring back? Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. Have a great day.